What's the link between software and your health? Hi, my name is Oded, and in this podcast I'll talk about software development in the field of medical device, pharmaceutical, and healthcare with industry-leading experts. Today I'll speak with Mike Zeevi and try to answer the question, can you implement the Agile principles in medical device software? Hi Mike, how are you?
Good morning. We're doing fine, as well as can be.
Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background?
Well, to make a long story very short, I've been in the software field 45 years, started in military electronics. 20 years ago, I got involved with medical devices, have been consulting for medical devices for the whole 20 years, everything and anything to do with software, except for actually writing code. We have worked with 500-600 companies and extensive amount of work on all different types of systems and all different levels of concern and submissions.
Okay, great. And maybe we can start with some general questions. For example, can you please tell us a little bit about the FDA approach to software? Are there different categories in an FDA regulated environment?
Well, this is a very interesting question, and it's actually a loaded question. Not only is the FDA, but every single regulatory body is scared of software. Software today causes more problems than almost any other technical issue. There are more recalls due to software than any other technical or quality issue in systems. You can actually check this out on the FDA database. And the FDA is, on one hand, trying to keep the floodgates open where companies are not bogged down by working according to draconic regulations, like in the civilian avionics field. And on the other hand, the FDA is trying to raise the level such that you want to build software and there is a risk to the patient or to the user, you have to make sure you do it a lot better. All the time, the FDA is raising the bar, and they're doing it in small increments, and it's just a matter of time before it becomes, I'm not going to say more difficult to do a submission for software, but it's a matter of time before companies are going to have to realize that they have to take it a lot more seriously than they're taking it today. Let me give you an example. We'll say that a system, the software in a system will say has a lifespan of, we'll say, somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 years. The average software programmer, depending on the country, depending on the geographical location, depending on what he's doing in the company, but can be anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5 years in the company or in the company on the project. That means for any project that will be around for over 15 years, you have changed your software development team or maintenance team at least 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 times over. And every time you change your software team, you lose the understanding of the system, you lose the knowledge of what the system does and how you developed it. You lose the experience of these people because you'll be bringing in people who are much less experienced. So the FDA realizes this, and they're putting a lot of pressure not only on the development of software, but also on how you maintain the software in terms of the level of documentation, the level of testing, and how you relate to it. So, you know, that's in a nutshell the way the FDA is moving. I mean, this is also true with Europe, with the MDR, which looks at software much more, we'll say, in an orderly fashion than it did previously under the MDD. There is work being done on the 62304, which is the standard for software development worldwide. And until it actually really raises its level a little more, the addition 2 will not be approved. So everyone's working in this direction. Hopefully, we'll be able to push it through.
Okay, super interesting. Are the FDA look at it as a single category, or they differentiate between different type of software based on risk or technology?
Well, the FDA. Let's put it this way. We're talking about the FDA, which is the CDRH, which are medical devices. There are elements that also fall in under the biological and pharmaceutical, for instance, blood banks. And in both cases, if the software is in a device belonging to the biological or pharmaceutical, which may be combination device or whatever, the other division is referring to the CDRH as the forefront. Now, the CDRH basically relates today to 3 levels of concern, which means how much injury can you do to the patient or user, minor, moderate, or major. The basic premise here is you have to develop the software regardless of your level of concern in a proper manner. This is detailed in the FDA's principles of software validation. It was I'm not going to say it was superseded by IEC 62304, which is a consensus standard, but basically the FDA says you have to develop the software regardless of its level of concern, where it will be safe, it will be maintainable, it will be readable, and all the other ables that are there. And when it comes time to do the submission, then you look at the level of concern and you say, oh, do I have to send in these documents or only these documents or even these documents, depending if your level of concern minor, moderate, or major. But the actual software development process should be, and according to the FDA, is identical for all levels of concern, which I would say should be according to the maximum risk and not the minimum risk.
Okay, I see. Before we dive a bit into Agile, maybe I'll start by asking you, what is your definition of Agile and how do you see it differently from the more waterfall approach?
Well, this is a loaded question because the term waterfall was actually coined at a NATO conference back in 1969 when software for military electronics was somewhere in the range of 3,000-4,000 lines of code that went into the system developed in assembler or machine code. And they needed a strict discipline on defining the requirements before you would move to design and defining the design until you move to coding and doing the coding and the testing before you actually integrated it within the hardware. There it was done because you couldn't do it any other way because of the elements around you. Today, or I would say from the 1980s, since the invention of the microprocessor and flash memory and electrical erasable PROMs, where you can very easily update the software as you go along, you're not limited to a waterfall environment. And having developed software both in the late 70s and throughout the 80s in military electronics, I could honestly say we never followed a waterfall methodology, but we combined an incremental with an evolutionary type of methodology to get software out in chunks and to do it in a way where we would develop part of it and put the emphasis where there was more criticality. So we knew what we were actually doing. In the 1990s, with the invention or the mass migration to cloud programming, everything in the cloud, web programming, whatever, with the concept of design your system in the morning, get it out in the afternoon, get feedback at night, and put out a new system tomorrow, which morphed into Agile programming. This is not very different than what we were doing, but on a slower scale and on a much larger embedded type of system. Now, when it comes to talking to the FDA or dealing with medical devices, I have no problem people calling their development process agile or anything else, as long as they know that requirements have to be defined and they have to be approved, and they have to be traced back to. Your architecture and design should not change as you move along, and you have to validate the system, the version at the end of your process. Now, if you take your features and your detailed design and your coding and your integration and your verification testing, this is basically an agile methodology performed in that area. But to go ahead and say the whole system is done agile from start to finish, I think is a little exaggerated, and I don't think it'll work. So you can either call from the features, story, detailed design through verification agile. You can call it incremental. You can call it sprint. You can call it build. You can call it anything you want. And when people tell me, no, we have to work agile because this is our DNA, I say, fine, work agile, but know exactly where to work agile within the development process. It doesn't work over the end-to-end software development and maintenance from requirements to validation, because you have to approve the requirements, you have to know what you're doing, you have to do a risk management, and you have to do a validation before you can release the system. So again, it should be taken in perspective. That's all.
So let me ask a further question regarding that. So is it possible, for example, to release out of the door to the patient software updates on a monthly basis, or based on what you just said, that's not really feasible?
It is feasible if you're talking about software development of a week, if you're talking about the verification of the software. When I mean verification, I'm talking about the tests that are performed to find bugs, and if we're talking about the definition of the system. So if you're talking about very small chunks, you can do it as long as you go through a proper design control process where you define exactly what you're changing. You go ahead and define your stories, your features, your detailed design. You write the code, you send it out to verification, you test it from end to end, you do regression testing, you do sanity tests, you make sure that the system you're actually testing is good. And then you can decide based upon the type of changes made, the scope of the changes, you can decide on the scope of the validation, where the validation does not have to take more than half a day, maybe 2 days, depending on the complexity of the system. In most systems we work with, if the verification is performed properly, the validation may end up taking a day or two or something like that. And it can even be less if it's only a delta change to a system based on this monthly update. The overhead for a monthly update is a lot. The question is that I always ask the companies when they say they have to get the systems out on a monthly basis, I say, do you have to do this because this is what your customers are expecting of you? You have to do this because you've got so many bugs, you have to make these corrections? Or you have to do it because you have an ego problem and you think that by putting it out every month, people relate to you more seriously. And, when I cause the customers to think about this, they'll come up with some excuse. Some will change their attitude and others will go ahead and say, no, it's very important for our customers. I don't think they really appreciate that their customers don't want updates that frequently. To be perfectly honest, if I was a customer and someone was pushing an update to me every month, I know that he cannot test it properly, and I would be very hesitant to accept these updates. So that's my own personal opinion, running around in the software field for as long as I have.
Brilliant. Can you maybe please elaborate a bit about the TIR 45, these guidelines? Do you think it met its goal, or for anyone who's not sure what it is, maybe please describe it also?
Well, the TIR 45 was produced in 2012 by AAMI, which is the association, or the American Association of Medical Instrumentation. It's a working group that went ahead and put together this guidance on using agile practices in the development of medical devices, because they were getting a lot of, the AMI is, it's one of these voluntary organizations. It does not come out and put out standards, and they'll follow the flow. Many companies talk agile. So they went ahead, they put together a group of people and sat down over a period, I think, of a year or two, and came up with this guidelines on how to align the way you use Agile within a medical device environment, seeing how it fits into 62304, and they even mention various different, the relationship to the waterfall, to incremental and evolutionary, defining stories. They talk about documentation, traceability. In all honesty, it doesn't, for someone who's an Agile freak, it will give him something to think about on how to deal with this. I don't think it makes any type of breakthroughs more than what I said earlier. It just puts it onto paper, and like most guidances, it does a lot of double talk on things because they don't want to commit to specific aspects, because don't forget, there was a committee that built this, and committee contains many people, and not all of them agree on Agile development. Not all agree within the Agile field. What is Agile? Not all. So it's a compromise on different things, which just gives a background to people who are looking to convince themselves they're working Agile, how they can do it. They can do it and still meet the FDA requirements. You read into it, you'll see that use common sense, follow what should be followed, and you want to call it Agile, we'll call it Agile. You want to use Agile terminology, we can use Agile terminology. But I don't think it's a breakthrough. I don't think, with all my clients that claim they are working Agile, I don't think anyone has really read this or understood exactly what it is. They've all taken various different terms used in Agile development, and they work according to these terms, even though they understand that requirements and validation have to be performed on the version level and cannot be built into sprints. You want to use the term sprint instead of build, no problem. You want to use the term epic story, no problem. So I don't think here there's a major issue with working Agile or anywhere else. And the TIR 45 is basically saying the same thing. Use common sense. You want to use Agile terminology. You want to use Agile principles. Do it as long as you understand where you're working You understand the regulatory field you're working in. You can't do what you think you want to do. You have to give it some thought and put it into some perspective. That's in a nutshell.
Well, that's great. That's a great insight. Maybe just to close up, just a question about where do you see the direction of the industry going? I hear a lot of buzzwords like IoT, cloud, big data, AI. Do you see it on the ground with new devices?
Well, 20 years ago when I got started, there was no system, no medical device that was software only, or there was almost none. Today, there are, I would say, I mean, you just look at the App Store, you'll see hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands applications there that could be considered medical devices. Some have clearance by the FDA, some are class 1, non-regulated, some are wellness, which are not medical devices, but the FDA is looking into how to formalize also wellness devices. And some are out there developed by 15-year-old kids who don't even understand that they're developing a medical device, and they're putting medical devices out there for everyone to use, which are not cleared and not tested, and of course not validated, and risks have not been assessed. So, you know, before you actually download or use something, you should look into it and see what you're using. Now, the direction is very simple. Software development is cheap, much cheaper than developing hardware. You don't need a laboratory. You don't need a bench, a test bench or a development bench to actually develop it. All you need is a PC or a Mac. You need a desk and a chair to sit in, and you can get out medical devices, and that's the direction things are going. Companies are looking more into telehealth, telecommunication, on working with medical devices from afar. We're in the midst of this pandemic, and many companies are looking to keep patients out of the emergency room, out of the clinic, because where are you going to come down with COVID-19? You're going to catch it in the emergency room. You're going to catch it at the clinic because someone in there is going to be asymptomatic and he's going to pass it on to you. So especially in the 50, 55, 60 year and above age group, companies are looking for applications that will keep people to be able to be monitored from afar, whether it's in cardiac issues, whether it's pulmonary issues, whether it's ophthalmic issues, whether it's general health issues. Keeping people away from where people are sick is a major issue. You may need a small piece of hardware. You can do it on your smart device. You know, today's smart devices with their microphones, with their cameras, with their, whatever there is, you can actually get a lot done remotely and send it in to the company, to your doctor, for him to assess your situation. A lot of companies are going that way. The buzzwords, big data, machine learning, IoT, they're buzzwords. I had a brilliant guy once told me that artificial intelligence is meant for people without normal or without regular intelligence, natural intelligence. So, when you're talking about all these different buzzwords, I've gone to companies and I've heard them say it, and in many cases, they're using it without knowing exactly what they're talking about. A lot is happening today in machine learning, in big data. A lot was happening in the past, but it's pushing ahead faster now because the machines, the PCs, the servers, they can actually compute the information. We have a lot more information out there. A lot more people are saving the information out there. We're able to see things. And don't forget, a major issue with medical devices, people want to live longer, and they are living longer. They want to live a more healthy life. They want to live a more enjoyable life where they don't want to be sick. Therefore, there will always be a lot of work being done for medical devices pushing in this direction, helping people live longer in a more, we'll say, respectable way. And this is important. And that's the reason that people are pushing it. If it wasn't for the fact that a lot of these companies are startups, the FDA years ago probably would have moved over to more draconic measures in terms of enforcing software development. But they don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, which is the startups, which these startups are pushing innovations, they're pushing new tools, they're pushing new technologies, they're coming up with things that, 5 years ago you would not think of. And a lot of this is software-based. And because of the lesson we're learning from COVID-19, where the FDA is pushing these companies to even move faster, move further, do more, and keep the patients away from getting sick.
That's really, really interesting. So maybe you can just tell us how can people get in touch with you or follow your publications?
Well, you can get in touch with me through my company's website, www.softquest.co.il. My email, mikez@softquest.co.il. Or look up Mike Zeevi on the internet. I've discovered there are two of us out there and only one is working in software. I am not the person dealing with diamonds, so forget that way. And anyone looking for information, anyone looking for, we'll say, a good philosophical discussion on where software is going for medical devices, you can gladly have it with me. We output every 6 months or so what I call my blog, where I will start off by telling what recalls have happened in the past 6 months, what is new in terms of guidances and standards, and I'll even rant a little on various different things I feel that there should be improvements. You want to get the blog, you can download it from our website, or you can drop me a line and I'll put you on our mailing list. And that's basically it. And, I love discussing software for medical devices with people. So anyone interested in discussing it, anyone interested in arguing about it, I gladly take you up on it. And as I said, the field is here to stay. We have to make the most of it, and we have to make the most of it in a way where we do it properly. That's the most important thing. We should not, as my grandfather used to say, if you have to kill someone, do it passively and not actively. Don't build bugs into the software. Make sure your software is working properly before you get out there. Make sure you're not harming the patients. That's the most important thing.
On that note, I'll say again, thank you very much. And we'll be in touch.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.